Welcome back to the special Speak Different series of the Imperfectionist podcast. I'm David Rendell, one of the co-authors of the book, Speak Different, How to Present Ideas That Inspire Action. And I'm really excited about our guest today, and I'll tell you a little story about why he is our guest today. So if you watched the previous episode, we had Eva Daniels, and I found her on LinkedIn. I was loving her stuff and used it in my speech that I did to Microsoft. And so when we wrote the book and when I started thinking about the podcast, I wanted to have her on. And I've never tried that before. I've never just cold messaged somebody on LinkedIn to see if they'd want to be a guest. And actually, it went a week. I heard nothing. So I was like, oh, that didn't work. Don't do that again. People don't want you to send them messages. But then she wrote back and said yes. And we had a great talk. And at some point, she reached around. She has books behind her like I do. She reached around behind her and said, have you heard of Adam Christing? He's got a book called The Laughter Factor. And one of the things we didn't do in the book was discuss how to use humor. And I use a lot of humor in my presentations, but I've never really tried to teach it to anybody. So I thought it would be fun to talk to somebody who knew how to do it, because I do get that question a lot. And that's why I want to do this podcast. People want to know, how can I be funny, or how can I be funnier on stage? And so I thought it would be helpful to talk to an expert. And she told me that you were an expert. So welcome, Adam. Why don't you, like we talked about, we don't, I tell people not to introduce themselves, but I tell people to kind of help people learn about them on the way. So maybe tell us a little bit about how did you get into being funny? How did you meet Eva? Anything? Any stories you have to kind of get us started?
Thank you, David. First, I want to say I literally ordered your book today, not realizing, this is the same guy. I'm on this.
Oh, the same guy.
Isn't that fun? And I can't wait to read it. Amazon allows you to dip in, and I'm excited to read your book, and I like the clarity of it. So I have a strange background. I was a speech major in college, and my favorite category, we had this, I guess they called it forensic speech and debate team, but they had this category called impromptu speaking, where you were given 2 minutes to prepare a 5-minute talk. That was my favorite. My other favorite was called speech to entertain, where basically you were doing a stand-up comedy set and then weaving in 2 or 3 message points to make it feel, lessons. And then my other side of my background is I grew up in Los Angeles near this wonderful club for magicians called the Magic Castle. And you know about that?
Well, keep going.
Yeah, I'd love to have you as my guest there sometime. It's this, you walk up to the door and there's this library bookshelf and you say, open sesame, and it opens up, and you can only access the club if you're a member or have a pass from a member. And so when I was 17, I auditioned to be what they call a junior member of the Magic Castle. And I was so nervous. I was literally shaking. And I'll never forget Diana Zimmerman, who started this program for young people. She said, your magic's not that good, but you're funny. We're going to let you into the club. And 2 years later, I was assisting David Copperfield on like a TV special. So it was such an amazing blessing for me. But I've been leaning on laughter really my whole life. When I was in 8th grade, I ran for student body president, and I decided I'm just going to make my campaign talk a comedy set. And I didn't even know what a comedy set was, just joke after joke about the teachers and pencil fights and whatever. And my opponent said, do we really want a clown as our student body president? And the voters said, yes, David. Yes. So I became president of Granada Junior High. And then in the 90s, comedy got really raunchy. And that hasn't, in some ways that hasn't changed, but we were kind of this first wave of saying, it doesn't have to be filthy to be funny. And so we launched an organization called cleancomedians.com. And I'm not exaggerating when I tell you we've booked, I think it's over 5,000 events for meeting planners, association, event coordinators. And it's great to show people that fun doesn't have to be a 4-letter word,
I like what you did there because, the main idea of the book is that persuasive presenters tell powerful stories that reinforce a single idea. And just like what you did there, clean comedy because it doesn't have to be filthy to be funny, right? It takes a little work, But when you can get something down to something like that, I read that when I read your bio today. And it's like, oh yeah, perfect, right? Like, and that's what I want speakers to do when they develop their speeches is take the time to simplify and clarify the big, the
Yes.
big idea. And then you can do all sorts of stuff underneath that. Okay, well, it doesn't have to be filthy to be funny, but then how do you make it funny? Or what's the problem with filthy or whatever? You could talk about that for days, I'm sure, but that's the headline, right? That's the main idea. And it's also, we talk in the book, a little bit of alliteration, right? It doesn't have to be filthy to be funny. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to be this, it can be that, kind of playing two things against each other, but also, using F words to not use the F word, and so,
That's
you
right.
know, I
Yeah.
wrote up my first book was called The 4 Factors of Effective Leadership. And then the next one was called The Freak Factor. And somebody
Yeah.
said something about it once. And I was like, I guess I just like F words. And I was like, that's not what I meant. That's
That's
not what I
funny.
was,
That's
where I was
funny.
going for.
Well, I'll tell you a quick story. When we launched Clean Comedians with that motto, it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be filthy to be funny.
Yeah.
I have a little bit of a background and a great interest in marketing. I thought, okay, we're going to send this out to meeting planners, conference directors, church pastors, school principals, and we just sent out like 100 brochures. But there was a typo. And instead of saying the motto you just heard, it said this: Clean Comedians is an organization of comedians who believe it doesn't have to be funny. It kind of took the pressure right off of us.
But even better, flip it completely. It doesn't have to be funny to be filthy. I mean, you can
that's
just really,
true. That's also true. Yeah.
that kind of describes my first time doing stand-up. I've only done like open mics and stuff. I mean, I use a lot of comedy in my speeches, but I never tried the stand-up comedian path. But I knew
Yeah.
that humor was important to my presentations. And part of what I teach people to do is sort of amplify maybe the characteristics that people have told you to tone down and moderate. And for me, it was always stop goofing around, stop being so silly, sit down, be quiet. And I thought,
Yeah.
I think humor is why people hire me, or at least significantly a
Yeah.
portion of the entertainment value. What if I tried to get funnier? What if I just, was a college professor teaching management leadership, and I would make it fun, but it wasn't hysterical, and I didn't get a chance to just do stand up. And so I would go to these open mics. And I remember the first time I went, I was so excited, and they want you to invite your friends, which is really because that's the only way they get anybody to come is the people who are there.
That's right.
Open micers.
That's right.
And I did a really good job of getting people there the first night. And then the people before me were just not funny at all,
Right.
and raunchier than anything. I've watched every stand-up special that comes out on Netflix. I've watched every stand-up special on Comedy Central. I've watched every stand-up special in the last 10 or 15 years. I've seen it. I love stand-up, and if it's raunchy, that's not my favorite, but I love stand-up, and I love to kind of learn how to be funnier. It was not funny. And I was so embarrassed for my friends, and I felt terrible. I mean, some of them were literally friends from church. And I was like, well, they're never coming back for my next set. Right. It was awful.
I'll tell you something crazy. I used to do in my early speaking days, I probably did close to 1,000 school assemblies.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I'd go into a high school or a middle school, and they wanted to laugh and be entertained, but they wanted a message. But this young man came up to me afterwards, and he just looked in shock. And I said, what's going on, young man? And he goes, I didn't know comedy could be clean.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
It was a revelation to him. Whereas when I grew up, there was raunchy comedy. But by the way, like George Carlin, who I think may be the greatest stand-up top 3 for sure of all time.
Yeah.
His first 2 albums are clean. You could listen to them with your mom or grandma, and they're hilarious. And so something happened where, shocking people is the quickest way to get a laugh. Surprise is one of the humor tactics that I talk about in my book.
Right.
So there was a time when dropping in, like remember, what's the classic movie, Gone with the Wind, right? Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. That was considered shocking. Whereas today that would be, in a Disney movie. And so it's become harder and harder to shock people.
Yeah.
And so we have found that, replacing vulgarity with variety, like just seeing you on this podcast, looking at your book, I can see you bring a fresh perspective, different look, and that's the spice of life. So I tell speakers, do the type of humor that's you. Don't try to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because we see these specials and we think, okay, so I need to do a political rant or I need to complain about my spouse. And I mean, that might be your thing. But that whole red brick wall stand-up thing, that's a very limited view of all that comedy can be.
Well, even those people oftentimes end up doing our job. Regular stand-up comedians end up doing corporate events.
Yeah.
They call them corporates, and they almost don't see them as sort of real things, but it does go sort of in both directions. The reason I lit up when you said Magic Castle is because in our book, Pink Goldfish, which is about standing out through weirdness and embracing apparent weakness, we talk about the Magic Castle Hotel. And so the Magic Castle Hotel is, I think, right next to the Magic Castle.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
And it's nothing special on sort of the outside. And if you saw it, it's very small and it almost looks like a little mini apartment complex.
Yeah.
But they do, no mini bar, but unlimited Cokes and Snickers bars and stuff. If you just come down to the front, and there's a soft serve machine that's running at all times, and they have the popsicle hotline. And so
the popsicle hotline, that's brilliant.
Yeah. Do you know the popsicle hotline?
Yeah, I know about that. Yeah.
So we did a book tour a few years ago. I wrapped my Honda Pilot pink for Pink Goldfish. And as you can see, pink is sort of the color.
Yeah.
And we just stopped in to give them a book and tell them they were in the book and just to kind of see the place. And they said, the general manager's here. And I'm sure he'd love to talk to you. And he came out and he spent like 30 minutes with us, and we learned all sorts of stuff we didn't already know. And then the coolest part was my other book is called The Freak Factor. I normally don't talk about my books this much. My other book is called The Freak Factor. That's sort of the main thing I've been speaking about for years. And he hands us his card, and his business, I think, was called Consulting Freak or Freak Consulting or something. I think Freak Consulting. Yeah. He was the CEO of Freak Consulting. And I was like, this guy gets it. So that's why I lit up when you said Magic Castle.
That's awesome.
So one of the big questions I get a lot when people reach out to me is like, hey, I do speaker coaching. Can you make me funnier? How can I be funnier? What do I need to do to be funnier? And that seems to be something that you've, thought a little bit more about. One of the stories in my book is about how my sister-in-law asked me if she could use a video of mine to show people how to use the 4 engagement techniques to connect with an audience. And I said, sure, except I don't know what they are. She goes, oh, you're doing them all. And I go, I'm sure I am, but I have no idea what I'm running on instinct. I'm running on feel, right? And so then I learned techniques consciously that I was using unconsciously, and then I was able to duplicate them, but then also to teach them. And so that's what I'm kind of looking forward to in this session is I think I've been funny sort of based on feel and instinct and kind of just experience. But I don't know that I could articulate, and you already started one of them, and I have told people this, one of them is surprise. When you do something surprising, that's a piece of it. And that is why shocking people with vulgarity and things like that makes people laugh because of the surprise part. But talk us through, you wrote a whole book called The Laughter Factor. Talk us through if somebody, I guess basically I'll sit back. I'm sure I'll jump in a lot because I can't help myself, but we've got time. If somebody said to you, well, I guess I'm saying it, Adam, I'm a new speaker or I'm an existing speaker. I have to speak every once in a while and I'd like to be funny or I'd like to be more entertaining. Where does somebody start and how does somebody build humor into a presentation?
Great question. Any others?
Just one big one. How can I be funnier?
I want to go back to what you said about the consulting because a lot of people, it's almost like there was a show many years ago called Make Me Laugh. And it was almost like I'm going to sit back and the comedian has to come and I'm going to be all stoic and they have to make me laugh. And humor shouldn't feel like that. It should be, think of the word humor. It's the same root as human. My wife and I have a fairly brand new grandson and he can't talk yet, but he can already laugh. He's already bonding with mom and dad. So it's very natural to laugh. And I think each one of us has an innate sense of humor. It's just finding your style. And so there are probably hundreds of ways to be funny, but I've focused in on what I think are the 5 primary ones, David, and they are surprise, which 5. We talked about.
Okay.
And I'll just say one thing about that. Mark Twain maybe had the greatest line ever about this. He said, "It takes me 3 weeks to prepare a good impromptu speech."
Yeah.
And so this idea of planned spontaneity.
Yeah.
So when I'm speaking at a corporate gathering, for example, what the audience doesn't know is I've already done some homework about who I could have some fun with. Jerry, the head of sales, is a terrible golfer, or Sheila collects more coffee mugs. And that's not going to play at a comedy club, but at the, Chevron Award show, it might kill because feels surprising. Like, how did he know all about our people? So I encourage speakers and entertainers to do planned spontaneity. Another one is called poke, and this is the trickiest of the 5, let's call them laugh languages, okay? Poke is the trickiest. This is where you're roasting and toasting, because sarcasm, which is wonderful and hilarious, can be a painful tool if used improperly.
Yeah.
So one of the things I love about the work you're doing is this idea of turning weakness into strength.
Right.
So I strongly recommend that when people use the poke humor tactic, start by poking fun at yourself.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So imagine if you're giving a talk as the, let's say you're the sales manager, let's say you're a guest keynote speaker at an event. The temptation is to say, here are my accomplishments. Like I just saw a guy give a keynote last night. I won't name names, but he had a 2-minute reel first about how great he is, all his accomplishments, his TV appearances. And I felt like, oh, well, I haven't achieved that. So I didn't feel close to him.
Yeah.
But a few weeks ago, I was with someone who started with this flop story and it was hilarious. And I go, oh, I like her. And she's been through what I'm going through. And so I want to hear this.
Yeah. Let me jump in there. When I taught college, I taught at a little school called Mount Olive College in Mount Olive, North Carolina, which is, in Eastern North Carolina. It only has a few thousand people, but it's the home of Mount Olive Pickles, which is one of the second biggest pickle companies. I think if you go to Sam's and Walmart, at least the last time I was there, they had Mount Olive Pickles. So I taught at that little college there, and I shared an office with this lady who, when I started, had been there already for 20 years. I think she went to school there, started teaching there almost immediately, and she'd just been there forever. And she gave me this book, and she said, there's this guy, Nito Quabain. He went to Mount Olive College when it was a 2-year college. It's the classic. He came over from somewhere with 52 cents in his pocket and built a life in America. Now he's the president of High Point University. And he wrote a book called How to Be a Great Communicator. And I read the book partially because she was like, read this book, read this book, read this book. And I read the book. And I was a new speaker at the time. I don't even know if I had a business at the time, but I was doing free talks and volunteer talks and trying to help out. And that was one of the things that he said in there that really caught me. And you said it sort of twice, is that what some speakers are trying to do is say, I'm awesome, fantastic, wonderful, and successful. You clearly are not. But if you do what I say, you can climb the ladder and eventually end up like me. So let me tell you how wealthy and amazing and fantastic.
Yes.
And to your point, what that causes a lot of people to do is not to strive, not to say, oh, tell me the way. It causes a lot of people to just shut off and go, oh, you're a different, better kind of person in a way that I could never be. So this isn't for me. I won't say the company either, but I went to a National Speakers Association chapter meeting one time here in North Carolina. And the speaker started by saying, well, when I quit my job as the chief marketing officer of fill in the blank Fortune 50 company, I had this idea. And so I called my friend, what's the Survivor guy, Mark Burnett or something. I called him, my friend, the famous, television producer. And then I called, this other person that I knew who ended up becoming the president of the United.
Yeah.
And I checked out. I was like, oh, so none of the things you're going to tell me today are going to have anything to do with me, because I didn't start as the chief marketing officer of a Fortune 50 company with relationships with some of the most wealthy and successful people on earth, and then parlay that into a speaking career.
Yes.
So, and it turned out to be true. So I love what you're saying. And that is one of the things, like I said, I guessed that I might know something about this, but not know that I knew it. And that's one of the ones that I learned from that book, because then what he basically said is, so don't always lift yourself up. Look for ways to deliberately poke fun at yourself, right? Self-deprecating humor. And then people will connect with you through your sort of flaws and weaknesses and in just your humanness. And I had a story at the time that worked, but I didn't know why it worked, and so I couldn't build on it. I ran my first marathon, and at the which is a great example of potentially separating yourself from the crowd, right? Like, oh, I run marathons and I'm
Yeah.
super fit and I'm better than you, and most people never do that. And so I say real quickly, I'm not trying to impress you, and that'll be clear in a second. And I said, at the 25th mile, this woman ran past me, and she had a note laminated to her back, an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper laminated to her back, pinned to her back. And I looked at it as she sprinted past me, and it said, "I'm not slow, I'm just pregnant."
Wow.
And I said, when I saw that, I was like, that woman is not going to beat me. And I tried to catch up with her and I couldn't, and she dominated me. And then I go on to talk about how I
I
looked at
love
the
it.
results and I got beat by the 30-year-olds and the 40-year-olds and the 50-year-olds and the 60-year-olds. And the only person that I beat in the top levels of anything was like the 70 to 75-year-old female category, whatever. And everybody loved it and they laughed. But I didn't realize why until I read that book, that self-deprecating humor makes you human. It
Yes.
connects people with you. And what it doesn't do is put you above the audience and have them start feeling like, oh, you're not like me. I could never be like you.
I love that story. And that's
Yeah.
exactly right. And in the chapter that I have on the power of poke, I talk about your humor should be sharp enough to pop a balloon, but never break a heart. And so
Mm,
you want to use, this is corny, but I still like it. It's kind of easy to remember, what I call authenticity, where you're doing two things. You're opening up about a vulnerable moment, a failure. I wouldn't call it self-defeating humor, but I like the word self-effacing humor.
yeah. Yeah.
Self-deprecating can sound like a digestive problem. So,
It's a big word. It doesn't work
yeah,
all the
it's
time.
a
Yeah.
tough word. And I'll give you a quick example. I'm in North Carolina as well, but I grew up most of my life and career in Los Angeles. And
Yeah.
many times I had the good fortune of hanging out with some of the top comedians in the country, some famous, not so famous. And we'd sit around in a circle and laugh our heads off. And we were not laughing at jokes. We were not laughing at
Mm,
somebody's material. We were laughing at gigs gone wrong.
mm,
And so somebody
yeah.
would talk about when the power went out completely and they had to do their show by candlelight. And some magician would say, I was on a cruise ship and the waves were all my equipment went off the side into the ocean. And we were
Yeah.
just laughing. But more
Yeah.
than that, we were oh, bonding over kind of our broken moments.
Over imperfections. Yeah. Not,
Yeah,
this is I killed, I
yeah,
murdered, I did
yeah.
amazing. I'm the funniest. It was sold out. Everyone loved it.
Mm.
It was, yeah.
One time, this is going way back, but Dick Cavett was kind of early on big time host interviewing. He worked with some of the great comedians of yesteryear, but he had a great line. He said, "It's not enough to succeed. Friends must fail." And
Mm,
I think what he was getting at with that very open, funny comment is, we don't often celebrate other people's success. We should. I think it's a great idea. But in our
yeah.
hearts, when we hear someone talking about how great they are, we kind of think, well, I'm not that, or I want to be that, or why are they? And so we have, I say it this way, humor is a shortcut to trust. And so
Mm,
if you start by making a little fun at yourself, you beat the rush for one, but also you're opening up a window where we see, oh, this person is like me. They're flawed and they're moving forward. I'll
yeah.
tell,
Yeah. That's, yeah. Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's my whole thing, is that things that look like weaknesses might be strengths, right? I was always in trouble because I couldn't sit still, be quiet, and do what I was told. And now people pay me
yeah,
to stand up and talk and run my own
yes,
business. And then they say, how did you get so funny? And I said, well, they say it takes 10,000 hours of practice to be the best at something. And I had 10,000 hours by fifth grade. It was just making, the school very upset, right? But
that's
it
great.
was. And I tell people the
Right.
funniest person in class wasn't the funniest person in class. that what seemed like the funniest person in class was the bravest person, the person who was willing to say out loud what other people were thinking but were afraid to say. In fact, some of the times I got the credit. Let's say I'm sitting next to you and you don't want to get in trouble, but something happens and you whisper something that's hilarious. You mumble something that's hilarious, but you're not
Yes.
willing to take a chance on it.
Yes.
And then I just blurt it out and everybody's like, Dave's killing it. You're like, well, Dave is just listening and Dave isn't afraid to get sent to the principal's office, right?
But you
And so
just
I
touched on,
learned through, the thing that I was always in trouble for is the thing that I literally get paid for now. And so that idea that the flaw is what makes us interesting, or the flaw is what helps people connect to us. I just love that idea.
yeah, I heard someone, I keep using these puns, pardon me, but this is not mine, but I heard someone say flawsome. And I love that fusion of flaw and awesome. But
That's our framework in Pink Goldfish.
oh, that's great.
The 8-part framework, like you've got your 5 parts, our 8-part framework is flawsome. So it's flaunting and lopsiding. And I won't go
Oh,
through all of them,
wow.
but flaw, and that's my license plate. My license plate on my
Oh,
car. If
I
you
love
drove
that.
past me in North Carolina, you'd see flawsome. So yeah, the exact thing, that your flaws make you awesome, right?
Well, you're clearly having an impact, because I know I didn't get this I don't have that book and haven't heard
Yeah.
you speak, but
Yeah.
you impacted someone who then repeated that. That's wonderful.
Well, I have my co-author is from Cary. Where are you at in North Carolina? I'm in Goldsboro.
I'm near
My
Asheville.
co-author's in Cary. Okay, so you're out in Nashville. Yeah,
Yeah.
but we're here in North Carolina, and you might have heard him. He speaks all over the place as well. His
That's
name is
great.
Stan Phelps. So
But, a moment ago, you touched on something that I think is really key about the fear factor, because there's a moment, even though I've been fortunate and given more than 4,000 presentations in my career using humor in one way or another, I still get nervous, David, every single time. And you have to be willing to flop or not get the laugh or the round of applause if you want the reward of the laugh or the applause.
Yeah.
I'll never forget, in maybe 3rd, 4th grade, another David Cullity, who years later went on to become an NFL player who was in the Super Bowl. But anyway,
Oh, wow.
the teacher, Mrs. Baker, was kind of mean. And she said, David, if you get out of your chair one more time, you're going to the principal's office. And we all thought, oh my goodness, what's he going to do? Because he kept getting out of his chair.
Yeah.
So I wish I could show you, but he physically stood up, kept the chair attached to his butt.
The chair,
And he ran around the room like a wild man, and we were howling laughing. And of course, he went to the principal's office, but hey, he killed.
Yeah.
And so there's this moment when you're giving a speech where you think, oh, if I do this joke and it doesn't land, the rest of my speech is down the toilet. Or if I try this visual thing or a new slide, you have to remember the audience is rooting for you. They want to enjoy it. They're not judging. They're like, oh, good. She's going to be entertaining, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing, strong recommendation I make to your speaking comrades of ours watching and listening, is do what you're comfortable doing. Like, test it out. And I'm sure this is what Eva and other speaking pros have said. Jerry Seinfeld, the bit you see him do on, say, the Jimmy Fallon show, he's already killed at probably 25 clubs with that same joke. So now he can relax into it, right?
Yeah.
So you don't want to be in your head when you're delivering the humor. You want to be in your heart and just relax and enjoy it.
Well, that's a good tip for speaking in general, right? If this is the first time you've ever said it, people say, I think I might wing it, or I've got some notes, or I think it'll be fine. I tell them, can you practice it at an employee meeting? If you're an executive or an entrepreneur, can you try it on a Zoom call? Do you ever do some training where you can even just take a detour? I mean, my first book started with a 10-minute, not really a bit because I wasn't trying to be funny, but a 10-minute, like, I think maybe my weaknesses might be strengths, and this kind of happened to me, and I have this idea, and I don't know if it's going to go anywhere, and I don't know if it's true. And people would ask questions, people would have criticisms, people would respond, and there's sections in the book from the way people reacted to the 15-minute version, the 25-minute version, right? I got so much that I want to say there. I like what you said, and I want to get to the rest of your framework too, because that's one of the things we teach is persuasive presenters tell powerful stories that reinforce a single idea, right? And one of the ways you reinforce is with a framework. You say, I know you want to be funnier, How do you do that? Here's the ways, right? There has to be, you can't just do a whole speech about, wouldn't it be great to be funny? And let's talk about the benefits of funny, and funny is
Right.
awesome. And don't we like funny? And you just keep going and everybody's like, yeah. And then you just leave. And they're like, well, I call it kind of going from why to how. Like, why is humor so important?
Yes.
Well, then how do I become funny? But I want to jump. I wrote so many notes here. I was working with a guy. I was coaching him. He's in the car or insurance business, but like for car dealers or something. It was real niche kind of stuff. And he wanted to. He does a lot of stuff. He wanted to be a better speaker, and he was going to be doing this, like just a quick intro for a retreat. And his bit wasn't right because it poked too much, right? And that's what he didn't get. So he thought it would be funny. And what he was really going to say, spouses were there. I mean, it was mostly men working for him. And so their female spouses were going to be there. Their wives were going to be there. And his bit was basically, your wife is too good for you. She probably just married you for your money, was sort of the theme of it, right? Like that.
Yeah.
And it was probably true to some extent with the audience. And I was like, that's a terrible bit. It's going to be awkward, uncomfortable. It's too close to being true. And so it was, we'll just poke fun. And it's like, that's not the right kind. And so I love at least start with yourself, because if at least you've done that, now you're not attacking people. But I know that I've had people tell me that they don't sit up front at a lot of events because they don't want to get picked on. People don't want to become the butt of the joke. People still, even though it's been forever, don't want to be at a Don Rickles show, right? They don't want to, be the butt of the joke. And I think you really do want to stay away from that unless you know the person or whatever. Making fun of the audience is usually not, unless you kind of say, even then, I'm kind of like this as well, or I do the same thing, or something like that.
And I think this is where likability is so key. And this is where telling a story, or what I call authenticity that we mentioned, because they'll follow you in your speech if they like you. So I do a lot of crowd work. Comedians call that crowd work, right? Take the handheld mic. I'll even grab one. The reason I love these for speakers who want to use humor is now you're in dialogue and not just monologue.
You can hand it off. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't release it. I've had horror stories where I let go of it. So I'm still holding it. And they can't tell how tightly I'm holding it. But there's a joke. A lot of comedians will go into the crowd, or comedy magicians or mentalists, and they'll say, this whole table's avoiding eye contact with me. And that's because everyone knows they don't want to be called up or the butt of the joke. But what we're seeing now, this brand of humor is so hot. Some of the top stand-up comedians are people where you go, I can't wait to see what's going to happen spontaneously.
Yeah.
Maybe there's going to be a little heckling, or maybe there's a couple that got engaged, and can the comedian play off of that? So I think there's a lot to be learned from. Yeah. It's almost cliche. People say, well, take improv classes. What you're really learning is self-trust. You're really learning not jokes, but you're learning, can I trust my instincts in the moment? And that leads me to the next laugh language, which is it's probably my favorite. It's called in-jokes. And that's the laughter that happens from shared experiences. I think in the book I say, nothing says friendship like a joke that only 3 people get. You feel like, okay, we're in on this. This is special to us. Yeah. And so I remember years ago, I was doing an event. I think I was the MC. And this guy named Matt was just a hoot, right? I would interact. I go, hey, Matt, before we go to our next speaker, anything you want to add? And everyone would laugh. He's just sitting in the audience. So I kept doing callbacks to this guy, Matt, and it got funnier and funnier. And finally, at the end of the whole gathering, I raced out on the lunch break and got a giant welcome mat from Home Depot, and literally physically go, here's a mat for Matt. It's the dumbest thing. But the audience went nuts, and Matt took it home, and pictures, because we had created this shared experience around this guy named Matt. So this is where, especially if you're hosting events, your ears are more powerful than your mouth. Listen to what's happening in the room. Yeah. And don't force your material into it. It might be a heavy moment where, I'll tell you real quick, David, this one actually happened I'm in front of all these vendors in Southern California, not vendors, they were in the utility business. So these are guys working on lines and power.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And they said, Adam, you're the keynote speaker for this 8 a.m. breakfast. And we fired about 25% of our employees recently. And at this breakfast,
these are the ones that are left.
Yeah, these are the ones that are left. And by the way, the purpose of this breakfast and your speech is we're going to ask them to contribute money to this charitable fund. And so I'm going, okay, early morning, a lot of people have been laid off and they're asking for money. This is going to be great. And then to top it off, the guy introduces me, true story, he says, before we introduce our special comedy guest speaker, we need to let you know that our wonderful manager, Tony Jenkins, was killed in an auto accident last week. Services will be this Thursday. And so now please welcome Adam Christing.
Yeah.
That was the intro I got. So
yeah.
Most comedians would maybe say one thing and just jump into their set. But I shifted from being this funny speaker to almost like a Dr. Phil kind of moment where I took Mike, hey, tell me about this man and how you know him and like ease into it. So you're going to listen your way into better speaking more than talking your way into it.
Yeah, so two things I wanted to follow up on. I think it's a principle in life, which is the same as what you said with humor. And I kind of mentioned it and then you said it. If you're not willing to not be funny, you won't be able to be funny. If you're like, I'm only going to say this if it's guaranteed to work. I'm only going to say this if they're going to laugh. I'm only going to say this if they're going to like it. You have to be willing to like have a batting average. You have to be like, I'm happy if 1 out of every 3. I remember when I would watch, we put this in the book, I think. I remember when I'd watch monologues back in the day from the late night guys, sometimes their funniest bits would be responding to the fact that nobody liked the joke.
Exactly.
It was, but if they just said, I'm only doing a monologue if everything I say is hysterical, everything, Saturday Night Live wouldn't exist. I don't think they have a very good batting average. Saturday Night Live wouldn't exist if they even had to bat 300. I think they bat like maybe 0.50, 100, maybe 1 out of every 10 skits really hits or really works. They have a lot of just, you're watching it. You're like, now that's what's great about YouTube with Saturday Night Live is you can watch the good ones. On social media, you don't have to wade through an hour and a half of, oh my gosh, is this going to pay off? Is this ever, what are they doing here? So I think that's a really big one. You have to fail if you want to, you have to be willing to fail if you want to be funny. And that's the other one that I think the way I've always explained why I like being an MC is I said, when I do my keynote, that's stand up. I know exactly what I'm going to say. I know it's going to be funny. I know when it's going to be funny. I'm in complete control. I know when they're going to laugh. I have a plan. It's like you said, I'm comfortable with this. I've done it 1,000 times. I'm running the show. When I'm an MC, it's improv. I have to listen. What is the speaker saying? Are they saying anything funny? I remember Donald Miller. Are you familiar with Donald Miller?
Sure. Yeah.
He spoke at this event where I was emceeing, and he said his one of his first lines. I'm sitting in the back and I'm like, ready to go because I need some material. He's on stage in front of 1,500 people, and he goes, I used to write memoirs, which means I wrote books in my underwear that people read in their underwear. And he just sort of stops there, and then he says, he just moves on, and he said, I did most of my writing in coffee shops in Portland and blah, 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 and just keeps going, right? And I was like, what? He just said that he wrote books in his underwear in coffee shops in Portland. So I had to wait an hour.
Love it.
And I had to set it up, but I got out there and I said, make some noise if you loved, Donald Miller. Woo! Make some noise if you learned something. Woo! Make some noise if you really think you paid attention to what Donald Miller said. Woo! I said, you did not. I said the first words out of his, and all I did was repeat what he said. And then when I did it slowly, they just died laughing. Right?
I love that.
And that's the kind of thing that I can't do that as a bit in my stand-up show. I can't do that at another one. That's a great one. That's an in-joke. And that's basically what I think emceeing is. We're going to do stuff here that's only funny for us. I'll never get to use it again. And I was asked to help this other guy be an MC because basically it wasn't great. His boss sent him to one of my events and said, "You need to learn to be better at be like that guy." And that's not
Right.
that's
Yeah,
not a
that's
great
tough.
start to a relationship.
Right.
So we did a call, and what he told me was he did the opposite of what you teach. You teach in jokes. And so when I asked him, "How do you prepare?" He goes, "Oh, before the event, I just basically get online and do a bunch of other things. And I basically just collect a bunch of things that I'm going to do. And then basically it's my turn. And I walk up there and I, tell the one about the rabbi or whatever, or I tell that funny story about the way my daughter swore at the teacher, or he just basically has it lined up. And it has nothing to do with anything that's happening at the place. And everybody just sits there and goes, okay, what was that? What was that about?
Well, I want to
And
piggyback
I
on
said,
that.
you gotta, it turned out he was to be fair to him, it turned out he also was like coaching people. So he was never in there. He couldn't do in jokes because he wasn't in. He was
That's
always
right.
sort of working
That's it. He wasn't in. Yeah.
because
And,
they had him doing other stuff besides MC.
and so I would share this with our speaker friends is looking at their website, your client's website. It's a must do, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Watching videos. But remember, a lot of that is branding, messaging, marketing. It's external. It's not internal, the way they actually communicate with each other.
Yeah.
And even some of the inside scoop that I collect, I still test it out. I flopped miserably one time, David, because they said, "Oh, you got to go after," I forget their names, Mike and Jerry and their shenanigans playing tennis or whatever it was. And so I planned this whole bit. I scripted and I go, Mike and Jerry. Well, almost no one in that audience knew who Mike and Jerry were. They were vendors.
Right. Yeah.
And it just fell flat. But if I had just simply asked a few people, like asked the meeting planner and asked a couple of the attendees, "Hey, do you know Mike and Jerry?" And so there's so many things that can go wrong. But one more tip related to in-jokes is it needs to feel like we're our own tribe. Like this is only happening for us. Like the example you gave with Donald Miller is so great because everyone heard that and you recognized it and brought it back.
Right.
And so you really can't force the in-joke. I would say though, that keynote speakers can still do in-jokes just like MCs can by being in conversation with the client and their people before they get on stage. Now, there are many great speakers who don't do any customization like that. It's basically, hey, I wrote a New York Times bestseller. Here are the highlights. See ya. Yeah. As you can tell, I'm biased toward personalizing it and customizing it. So I send out a real simple, it's like a 6 question survey asking about frustrations. Who are some people I can have some fun with? Are there words, phrases, acronyms that you guys overuse? So, but when I go up there, I feel like, well, put it this way, the best compliment I often get is, how long have you worked for our manufacturing company?
Right.
So I become an extension of
which division do you work in again? That's crazy. I haven't met you yet.
Yeah. I don't even have one of their hats. I didn't even get all the swag,
I love it. Well, and I do think I tell people that too. I said, you think improv is just making stuff up, but there's rules, They don't just say shout out words. They say shout out a job, shout out a color, and shout out a city. They don't just say things and you know what I mean? And there's rules. There's yes and there's all these other things, and you have to go along with it, and you don't get to stop it, and you have to agree, and just all this sort of stuff. And so I think there's a higher level of improv for MCing, for example.
Oh yeah.
But I think now that I've done more of it, I bring it to my keynotes as well, where I'm listening before I go up there. I'm paying attention. I have the pre-call and all those kinds of things, and I'm looking for stuff. And if I can get up there, and my favorite is, and we talk about this in the book, never say the cliche thing when you get up there. Never go, "I'm really happy to be here. It's great."
Right.
I use that all the time. I said, you have to do something with it. I go, "I'm really happy to be here. I know a lot of people say that, but I am. And here's why." And then I tell them about some terrible thing that happened to me along the way, how I barely got there or something like that. Right. And then I say, so when I say I'm really happy to be here, I'm really happy to be here. Like one time it was 3 a.m. and I couldn't get into Springfield, Missouri, and I got to St. Louis instead. And my Uber driver was falling asleep on the 3-hour drive. I mean, I had a story, right? But the story kind of fit because it was about coming to them, right? And that's never going to sort of work again. Okay, so we've done surprise, we've done poke, we've done in jokes. There's two more, and I love to finish things, so I want to get to all five, or else I'll
Yeah,
feel
yeah.
sad. I'll feel sad. Yeah,
We need closure.
yeah.
So the next one is wordplay.
Okay.
And these are people who love, puns and the dad jokes and
Mm-hmm.
alliteration. And by the way, you might have more than one of these. I call them laugh languages, but you probably gravitate toward one of them. And
Mm,
when we get to the fifth one, I'll tell you, your viewers and our friends, how they can discover their laugh language for free.
yeah,
But if you find that somebody cracks you up by sending a silly, pun by email or a meme, like I'm
yeah,
seeing on LinkedIn, lots of memes now that are kind of like misspelled signs and funny things like that.
yeah.
If you gravitate toward that, and by the way, I can't remember a time in my 4-decade career where dad jokes have been hotter. Like I'll do a Fortune
Oh, sure.
1000 company
Yeah.
and I'll hand 4 dads in the audience the most lame dad joke ever. And then we'll have a little contest and we'll have rim shots, boom, boom, give away a prize. And there's like 5 minutes of comedy gold because we're seeing people willing to kind of go for it, like you were talking about earlier,
Yeah.
and say the joke. And I will
Well,
add,
and
though,
sometimes, let me jump in. Sometimes it's funny to not be funny.
yes,
I do that a lot when I'm an MC. I will share a joke that somebody gave me that I know isn't hilarious, or do
mhm,
some kind of obvious wordplay or something like that. And when people don't like it, and somebody might, they're not being mean, but somebody might boo, and I say, "You're misunderstanding this. I'm not trying to be funny. I'm trying to ruin your not, and then that
that's,
can be funny. And I mean,
yeah,
that's what a dad
yeah,
joke is. A dad joke is,
yeah,
this isn't hilarious, but somebody's
yeah.
put a certain amount of time into this, and you can either appreciate it or not, but nobody's pretending to be Jimmy Fallon here or
That's
Jerry
right.
Seinfeld or
That's right.
something. Yeah.
And comedy humor kind of dies when you analyze it. We've been
Yeah.
analyzing a lot, but I
Yeah.
did give some thought. What is it about dad jokes? And I think it's this sense of they're safe and they're clever, and it kind of feels like, I get it. Do you get it? There's something
Yeah.
about that. It's almost connected to the in-joke thing. And then the last of the 5 humor tactics is probably the one that speakers could just jump on most immediately, and that's amplify. And this is exaggerating stories and situations for more impact. So
Mm.
it's surprising how many speakers keep the same tone. One of the reasons I like to use a handheld mic, even when I'm keynote speaking, is I could whisper, I could step away from the mic, I could interview someone. There's lots of ways to amplify what you're doing. Maybe it's involving some people in your presentation.
Mm.
Maybe it's, instead of telling a story, maybe it's reliving it, where you are being chased by a
Yeah.
bear on the
Yeah.
stage, where it feels like, wow, I'm reliving this with the speaker. And numbers are great. Funny word pictures, like we've been talking about the Magic Castle Hotel. I can't get over this idea of the popsicle. What's it called? The popsicle hotline.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I
For
mean that.
people who don't know, I guess because we're just talking about it, this little tiny pool, there's only 7 chairs at the pool. The pool is smaller than your living room. And
Yeah.
there's a little red phone with no numbers, no buttons, and you just pick it up and they say, Popsicle Hotline, how can I help you? And you tell them which color. It's only like 3. It's like orange, red. It's like the original box from 1980. It's purple, red, and orange. And you tell them which colors you want. And then on a silver tray with a white glove, they come out and they give you as many popsicles as you want for free. And the popsicle hotline is always ready. Yeah.
And so, see, we're retelling that wonderful
Yeah.
experience because they've so amplified something that most hotels would be like, oh, if you want popsicles, they're $3 over here in the freezer, right?
Yeah.
They've made it memorable. So how can you
Yeah.
make your speech more colorful, more
Hmm.
visual,
Yeah.
more humorous? And I have a whole chapter in this on the book with examples from comedians. But one thing I want to say just in general is there's a myth that only professional comedians are funny, but
Mm.
you absolutely positively have a sense of humor, or you're not human. And I think most of our viewers are human.
Yeah.
And so it's becoming comfortable. Like you've probably seen people say, well, David, you're so good at learning people's names. And I'm just not good at that. When really
Mm.
they don't take that extra beat to say, look at the name tag, oh, Tiffany, and then take a moment to kind of learn it. And so in the same way, somebody might tell a joke at whatever it is, a corporate staff meeting, and it flops. And so then they tell themselves, I'm just not funny. Well, no,
Yeah.
that joke in that moment didn't work, but you can still delight people with your sense of humor.
Yeah. Um, all right. So let me recap for people. Was surprise one of them? It was one of the five?
That's the first one. You
Yeah.
got it.
Surprise, poke, in jokes, wordplay, and amplify. I do the wordplay a lot. I told you the one, I was introducing a guy named Lopez. And this is good to get back to the poke part
Yeah.
because since I knew this could potentially be touchy, I asked permission first, right? And I said, "Are you
Nice.
married? Do you and your wife have, more than one or two kids?" And he said, "Yeah, we have four." And I said, "Okay, I've got this joke. I want to introduce you and say you and your wife have a lot of kids, and you refer to your wife as a Lopez dispenser." And he started
That's
laughing and he said, "I can't wait
great.
to tell her." Everybody in the hallway, and my job is to try to get people to pay attention to these vendor talks they don't want to
Yeah.
pay attention to
Right.
and make
Right.
this interesting when it's not interesting necessarily. And he said people kept coming up to him in the hallway and they wanted to know if he had swag of like Pez dispensers. He's like, "That's not my joke. I didn't know he was going to do that. How would I have Pez dispensers?" They're like, "You should get them." And he's like, "I don't know what's happening." But people were
I love it.
talking to him because of it. But because that was, so getting back to poke, because that was potentially like, I mean, if I don't ask permission and if he's touchy about it, he could go to the organizers and be like, "Dave was up there talking about my wife, and
Right.
I didn't
Right.
appreciate that at all. What kind of operation are you running here?" And instead, it turned out to be hilarious. But I think that's another one. And I like your idea. One time I was in Houston and I was testing them in the hallway. So with vendors, this stuff that I was thinking about doing that was like local, right? So I was in Houston. At breakfast, I saw a woman wearing a University of Houston shirt, a sweatshirt, and it gave me an idea. And so I went up to one of the vendors and I said, "I got a bit I want to try out on you." And they said, "Okay." I said, "Ever since I've gotten here to Houston, all these older ladies keep hitting on me. They keep asking me to go out with them, and I tell them I'm married, and they won't listen. And um, I'm getting really frustrated. But I've been talking to the people about it, and they said, 'Oh, don't worry, it's just the Houston Cougars.'" Um, and it bombed with one, vendor, and then it killed with another one. And it
Yeah.
only would work in Houston because you'd have to know the University of Houston
Yes.
was the Cougars. It's not a Milwaukee joke.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
That's
ended
good.
up not using it, but that's another way you can test it is you can just what I teach people is if, um, one of my funniest bits that I use at the beginning of every one of my speeches is I'm 6'6", my wife is 5'3", and a lot of people wonder how that works. And what I explain to them is in our relationship, deodorant is more important than breath mints.
That's brilliant. Love
And it
it.
always goes slow through the crowd because it's a little bit of a thinker. So then I'll always say that, "Oh, you hear that moving? If your buddy didn't understand it, explain it to him," which is a
Yeah.
little poke, but you're not doing it at anybody in
That's right.
particular.
That's right.
And, if somebody really doesn't get it, you can explain it to them later. People, when they get a selfie later, they're like, "Oh, I really get it now," because they're literally right there in
Yeah.
my armpit. But the principle that I teach there is I tell people, I said that once off the top of my head
Mm-hmm.
to two people at like a dinner party, and they died laughing. And one of the principles, and I'd like to hear if you think this is true as well, if you can make two people laugh with it, it'll kill on stage.
Oh, I love that.
But just because it kills on stage doesn't mean you can make two people laugh with it, right? Some things
Yeah.
aren't,
Yeah.
things will be funny in a bigger and because part of what I tell people is if you're talking to 1,000 people, if 200 of them laugh, it sounds like everybody's laughing.
Yeah.
If you're talking to 10 people and two people laugh, it sounds like nobody's laughing.
That's right.
you know so those are a couple of ways that I test it out,
What?
but I do a ton of the wordplay one. I'm kind of learning. I do a ton of the wordplay one, which then kind of becomes in jokes over
Yeah.
time because I do a lot of stuff with the same
Well,
audience. And
a lot of these overlap, right? But
yeah
I love the
yeah
story several stories you just
yeah
shared
you
are
can
great.
poke with some wordplay, and it's surprising because nobody expected the Lopez
Yeah.
dispenser. And yeah
I think at the heart of all humor is surprise. And so when
yeah
you're amplifying your story, you're surprising like, wow, she's really taking me to the jungle or wherever this story took
hmm
place. And then think of Stephen Wright, maybe to me the funniest wordplay genius. Like he's the guy who said, "I put spot remover on my dog. Now he's gone." So you have surprise and you have
yeah,
wordplay, right?
he was the king of the little really tight,
Yeah.
sort of bits.
And maybe
Yeah.
there's something that I can add to that. First, I want to comment. I love what you're talking about. I put it this way: if in doubt, leave it out. When you're a paid speaker, it's different than being a comedian. A comedian, the audience is going like, "Hey, we're going to have some drinks. We're going to this nightclub, and let's see who's funny." Paid speaker, I really think your job is to make the meeting planner, the organization look
You're
good.
working for the people paying you. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not like, "Hey, I'm an artist. Come see me. Hope you like it. But if you don't, tough luck." So
And if you're an executive or an entrepreneur and we're trying to help you be funnier, you're representing yourself. You're representing the company. You're representing the culture of the organization. If you do things on stage that sort of undermine that just to be funny or something like that, that can be a real issue. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd rather get paid than make half the people laugh. And so it's hard. It's painful. I'll be walking up to the platform as an MC, for example, and I'll go, "I could do this joke. I could do this." And I just let them go. It's like, no, I want to be in the moment. What's best for the whole group?
Oh, people have told me some terrible, terrible, terrible jokes that they want me to tell on stage.
Oh, yeah.
And it's hard. And I tell them I can't and I won't. And they argue with me. And then it hurts their feelings a little bit because maybe I did say something that somebody else told me. Because, if you do some wordplay, somebody will tell you a good wordplay one and maybe you can share it, and that's a way to get the audience involved. I've given them a job, to give me weird words in the hallway and I'll include them in my remarks on stage, right? And then one guy, like the organizer, his kid did it like virtually and found the longest word in the English language or something and gave it to me and whatever. But then somebody's like, "Oh, Dave's open to crowd work." And then somebody just gets filthy and extremely inappropriate. And I'm like, oh,
I've never, back to clean comedians for a moment, never in my entire career has somebody come up to me after a gig and said, "Hey, that was hilarious. I really wish it could have been more raunchy." Like, I've just never had that.
Yeah.
There's a saying that funny is funny. And so if in doubt, leave it out. But you can delight people by tapping into these different humor tactics. And chances are what makes you laugh, if it's, let's say, in jokes, that's probably your go-to laugh language.
Yeah.
And so I never do a big pitch or promotion, David, but I will make this resource available to your fans and friends here. If you go to thelaughterfactor.com, you can take 4 minutes and there's no charge and it'll help you identify your laugh language. It's just some fun questions.
I'm legit excited about that.
Yeah, it'll let I'll be curious what yours is. I was surprised at my own laugh language.
So we gotta wrap up. I want to ask you, I want to say one thing and get your feedback on it and then have you kind of close. But I tell people you don't have to be funny. You can find funny.
Oh, I like that.
Because I think some people, if you're trying to be funny and you're not, it comes across really bad. I mean, now we have cringe and cringy as sort of way to do that. And so I remember back to Nido Qubein, we did one of the events that I was emceeing at High Point University. It was a big moment for me. I actually got to introduce, Nido, which is cool, as a speaker, but also coming from Mount Olive College and having that connection. And then John Maxwell was one of the speakers as well. And I like my early career in leadership and managing nonprofits in a religious setting was, getting his tapes and reading his books and stuff. So that was a huge moment for me as well. Yeah. And Nido got up there to do a talk. And basically the first 5 minutes of the talk was a bunch of memes and a bunch of funny videos. Yeah. And people were dying laughing for 5 minutes. Yeah. As he it wasn't him clicking through and he wasn't saying anything. Basically, the beginning of his speech was a bunch of funny videos and, little things popping up on the screen. And what I tell people is you don't have to be funny. You just have to at least know it when you see it. And some people don't. You've always had the people who share something and they're like, "Isn't that hilarious?" And you're like, "It is not. You're not even good at finding it." But if your kid made you laugh, if you've ever told a story about something silly your kid did and it made other people laugh, you didn't make that up, but you saw that and said, "That's funny." You read that thing on Facebook and you said, "That's funny." You saw that video on TikTok and you said, "That's funny." Mm-hmm. You can oftentimes bring that into the situation and say, when I was preparing for this, and I know you're all aircraft mechanics, that's one I did recently. And there's a TikTok where this guy's like, "I'm Steve, the aircraft mechanic." I forget his name. And he always answers some simple question and then goes into some deep thing about like the Lord of the Rings or something.
Yeah.
He's like, a lot of people ask me what this is on a plane and they think it's this, but it's actually not. And that's very similar to what the Orths of Gorgor did during the first millennium of the 14th. And he
That's
just goes
funny.
to this long thing.
Yeah.
So I found that it's funny. It's funny to them. They're aircraft mechanics. It wouldn't be funny to anybody else. So, but the other big one I tell people is I don't think it is mostly about jokes like Stephen Wright. Why do we park in driveways and drive in parkways? It is mostly about stories. So if someone's looking to just get started and they're looking for real practical, I like your principles, but sometimes even I get stuck telling people principles and they're like, okay, so what do I do?
Right.
So if somebody wants to include humor next time they talk, what's like your number one go-to, try this? I guess mine, I'll go first. If I was doing it, I would go with something you talked about earlier and something I talked about earlier. I think it's always stories. Persuasive presenters tell powerful stories that reinforce a single idea. Don't try to tell a joke, tell a story, and tell a story about you messing up, falling down and hurting yourself, making some kind of silly mistake, making a fool of yourself. They'll laugh. They'll feel more comfortable with you. You'll connect. That would be my advice. What's yours? What's the here's a small way where you can really tangibly okay, I can think of a time I messed up. It was funny. I'll tell that story. That's something somebody could do. What's one specific thing somebody could do to be funnier next time?
I love your idea. I would put it this way. As you're thinking about your speech, what the audience isn't going to tell you, but what they secretly want is more windows, less lumber. Help us see what you're talking about. Don't tell us, show us with your story is great. Another thing I'll say is, well, two quick things. One, what's already working for you? And what might be working for you when you play golf with your friends or when you're at the, Rotary Club meeting or wherever you hang out with people. I guarantee you have some go-to stories. You have a go-to joke. You have a story about being a teenager or about your grandkids, whatever it is. Do more of what's you. And then the final tip would be, don't think that just by starting with some funny video clip or a funny story that you're done, because the audience, well, Jay Leno taught me this, LPMs. How many laughs per minute can you get into your presentation? It's not enough just to hook them and then, okay, so the next 45 minutes, they're mine. Look for ways to continually reinsert humor. And then finally, I would say, you don't have to be the funniest person in the room, but you can be the orchestrator of fun. It might be asking a question, having people answer, what's the first or worst job you ever had? Well, just that question alone, you're going to get some funny answers.
Yeah.
You don't have to tell jokes, but you're eliciting a good time with your audience.
Yeah. I think that's a good one too, because I think a lot of people, the classic advice is start with a joke, right? And it's first of all, maybe start with humor, but probably not a joke. Start with a funny story. But for me, one of the rules I stick to is the humor has to drive the message, right? Persuasive presenters tell powerful stories that reinforce a single idea. I never finish a funny story and go, now let's get back to it.
Yes.
Or people, at the beginning, it's okay, now let's get started. It's no, the humor should never be this unrelated detour. It's, I do a talk called Dead Leaders, Lessons from the Lives and Violent Deaths of the World's Most Influential People. That's a tough talk, right?
Wow.
You're talking about people sacrificing everything to have an impact, and that's sort of one of the lessons.
I'm tempted to say that kills, but we don't want to go there.
It murders. But it's pretty heavy at times. And when you're talking about sacrifice and you're talking about death and you're talking about giving everything, it's heavy, right? And there's 4 principles in the framework. And what I do is I tell a funny story at the beginning of each section, talk about laughs per minute, but also specifically to lighten it up before it gets heavy again, and then lighten it up before it gets too heavy. So one of the ways I explain it is through your speech. We're both old enough to remember tapes. It used to be you had to kind of listen to the songs in order, and sure, you could fast forward them, but it was a hassle and you didn't know where the next one started. It wasn't even a CD where you could skip to the next one. And so most artists would go fast song, slow song, sad song, happy song, upbeat song, bittersweet song, etc. And I think you want to do something similar. And so I do try to think about that. Is it time to make people laugh again? Is this a good time to insert a funny story? Is there a funny story? And so that might be another way to stimulate the thought of, like you said, what's a funny story you tell? What's a go-to that you kind of have? What's a way you make your family laugh? Another one might be, what's a story that would reinforce this point or this idea that would also be funny, right? Or could you find some humor in an existing story? And that's probably a good way to get started.
The shortest speaking course I ever heard, David, was just a few words: make a point, tell a story.
Yeah.
And so there's this delicate balance. The story needs to be strong enough to stand on its own, where even if there was no speech, like, this is a great story.
Yeah.
But it also needs to serve your bigger point. I love the clarity of this, one message and everything built around it. So
yeah.
Great stuff. We could talk for many hours about all kinds of things.
We've already gone over an hour. I love it. And I could keep doing this. So his book, Adam Christing, am I saying your last name right?
Yes, Adam Christing.
Adam Christing. The book is The Laughter Factor. You can go to thelaughterfactor.com and take the test to find out your laugh language. Is that what you call it?
That's right.
Your laugh language. I'm going to do that after this. It's been a pleasure. If you want to be funnier, tell stories, make fun of yourself. Let's review the framework again. Surprise, poke, remember self-deprecating humor, in jokes, wordplay. What I do when I MC is I rhyme people's names with stuff. So I pretend I interviewed them. And I'd go, Adam Christing's about to come up. And I asked him if he likes to be in charge. And he said, no, I'm more about assisting. And, just keep going through. I got to introduce a guy once, and the last one, I went in alphabetical order with kind of things that might go before. And I go, he doesn't like to wear a jacket, but his last name was Estes, but he likes to wear a vestus. And I just went through the whole thing. I went with any word I could find.
Yeah.
I'm handing him the microphone. He goes, that's the best introduction I've ever had in my entire life. Good. And all it was just rhyming stuff with his last name.
Yeah.
But finding a way to, you didn't just say other words that rhyme. But it was I made up, I interviewed Ryan earlier and I asked him a number of questions, and he just.
Oh, I love that. And then that's the last one, because that's a combination of wordplay and then amplify, which is just exaggerate, amplify, turn up the volume. Remember that great scene in Spinal Tap, these go to 11.
Hey,
go to 11 on your story.
You just keep doing it. That's in Pink Goldfish. And actually the name of my assessment for the Freak Factor, my online assessment, is called Amplify. Turn up the volume on who you are. My biggest bit is, in fact, the number one thing that people say to me when they see me after I speak, maybe they'll see me 2 years later, they go, Dave, every time I'm in an airplane bathroom, I think about you. Because I do this bit, I'm 6'6", and I do this bit about how I can't fit and how it's impossible to move around. And I do yoga, but I act it out. And I think that's one of the things that turns it from a funny story into I physically do things and people just can't, forget because you're using your body to sort of demonstrate it. You're not just standing still while you do it. And I'm not much of an actor, but I can do that. All right, Adam, it's been fantastic. I'm excited. I even, I need to get into this. I didn't know about cleancomedians.com. I love to make people laugh, and
check it out.
I went to Sunday school, so I know how to keep it clean. I knew how to not swear in front of my parents. So I'd love to check it out and maybe end up doing some work with you. I'm excited. I also need to get a copy of your book. I'm going to do it on Audible because I'll listen to it while I'm golfing. I don't sit down and read much anymore, but I'm always listening to a book or a podcast or something. So,
I'd love to have people check out cleancomedians.com. They'll get a lot of laughs, and they'll also see great people like you who make people laugh without embarrassing an organization. So
I'm a huge fan of Nate Bargatze, and he's doing a whole a whole thing with that. And I've been following his career since before he just he's exploded over the last few years. Cool. I love to see it. So thanks for being on, Adam. I really appreciate it. That's been another episode of the Imperfectionist Podcast, our special Speak Different series. I'm going to have one of my buddies, an MC from Australia, on Andrew Klein is going to be on later this week, although who knows when it'll come out. But I've got that podcast coming up in a couple more days. I'm excited about that. So thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on The Imperfectionist.